creativity. As you all know, the Czech new government is just 3 weeks in the office, and we need some time to debate in more detail common positions of 5 political parties on many European issues. So I hope we will be able to come with some Czech concept of priorities in maybe a month time, and then we will definitely go back to our French and Swedish colleagues to debate with them these visions of priorities. That process will take, well, definitely some time in the spring, and I believe the Czech Republic will be able to set priorities which are plausible for our partners, which correspond to the main goals of European politics, and which simultaneously are well suited for finding a compromise on the European level. So that will be the task for me over the next few weeks, and I hope we will reach an agreement with our partners on the more detailed Czech program in frame of the TRIO program. That's just the starting position, and we can continue, I think.
So perfect, thank you for your introductory remarks. I would like to invite His Excellency Alexis Dutertre to share the French insights on the priorities and his visions, also on the commentary of our beloved minister. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Bonjour, bon après-midi. Thank you so much, Mr. Minister, for being today with us and for sharing also the new vision of the new Czech government. I might be a little bit longer than you because I was asked also to come forward with some of our priorities, but I'll try and make it short so that we can have some moment for the debate. Maybe there's one point, a general point, I would like to clarify. In the debate on our presidency and on this moment for the trio, a lot has been said about the French vision on strategic autonomy, and maybe sometimes we're exclusively or only focusing on strategic autonomy, whereas it's not exactly what we're trying to achieve for our presidency. Strategic autonomy has a specific meaning when it comes to security and defense policy, whereas for the EU, we are trying to achieve a more sovereign Europe, which is a little bit different than just seeking for strategic autonomy in the way of security and defense. And I would just like to concentrate on what it means to look for a more sovereign Europe. If I can put it very shortly, it would be, for France, it's our 13th presidency of the EU Council. And we've all seen the EU evolve a lot. The EU today is not the same that we knew when we had our previous presidency in 2008 and even before and before. And it's just the idea that we started with a common project for coal and steel. We had the internal market, we had the white paper on the internal market, and we've been focusing for long on internal issues, internal market issues. And we've achieved quite a lot, because this is really the bulk, the core of our cooperation today. But the idea is to look at the world as it is today. A world which is much more brutal, with third countries competitors, which are much more aggressive in our environment, in all the fields, and not only in security and defense matters. It goes to technology, it goes to trade, it goes to industry, it goes to value chains, it goes to all those elements. And it's true also that our allies, the United States, are also looking somewhere else. And so it means that it's a moment also for the EU to, with our allies, but also alone when necessary, when needed, to be able to define what are EU's interests, and that we should be able to define our interests by ourselves and for ourselves. And so we like much more the idea, a very pragmatic idea of a more sovereign Europe, which is we should be more sovereign, for example, in our climate policy, because we are setting the target for the rest of the world. We should be more sovereign also in our digital approach to regulating platforms, because they are mainly extra-European platforms operating within the EU. We should also look at, let's say, our cultural sovereignty, because we all know, for example, that we can only finance our cultural models with, for example, copyrights, if we want to still be able to promote a European cultural model, and so on, and so on. So I would prefer the idea of looking for a more European sovereignty, rather than just the issue of strategic autonomy. That's my first point. My second point is, it might surprise you, but I guess this presidency and this French presidency is not so much interested into concepts. Maybe we've been portrayed, or it might be easy to see France as loving concepts. But today, with our President Emmanuel Macron, for this presidency, we're looking much more at pragmatic issues, being able to deliver concrete solutions for the Europeans, for EU to be more sovereign, but looking at things in a very pragmatic way. And I would take just one example. We used to love institutional reforms. And when you look at all the ideas we've been promoting with the Conference on the Future of Europe, you will notice that we have been focusing mainly on how can we bring citizens closer to Europe? How can we bring citizens closer to saying their word, having their word on the European policies? And this is what we will try also to achieve. We want to be honest brokers on the legislative agenda. We want to ensure citizens' participation in the EU agenda, and we want to look at the issues that the European Union is facing today in a very pragmatic way, without ideology. This, I would say, would be my, general remarks. Then, when I go to the priorities of the French presidency, you know the motto, you've put it in your paper, so in French it would be relance, puissance, appartenance. So if I translate it in English, it would be recovery for Europe, it would be more stronger Europe, and it would be a sense of belonging. And I will go through those three priorities. The first idea is, as I was mentioning, a more sovereign Europe. Three main priorities, or three ideas there. The first element is we should take care about our borders, and we should have stronger policies and be able to deliver on stronger control of our external borders, partnerships with third countries on asylum and migration, and be able to show to our citizens that we are able to deliver there. So the Asylum and Migration Pact, but also the Schengen Code, Schengen Border Code, will be among the concrete priorities that we want to try and deliver or move forward, which is the idea of, let's say, the first EU white paper on defense. And there we're talking about security, defense, in a way that we want to be complementary to NATO, and we don't want to get into those ideological fights on duplication or so on. We are looking at very concrete proposals. A global assessment of the threats that the EU is facing, the development of EU capabilities, being able to be a security provider in maritime, cyber, space areas, developing partnership, and being able also to act alone when needed. I'm just taking one example. The Takuba Task Force in Mali, in Sahel, is a very concrete example for us of what we mean by strategic autonomy. It is clearly an area where our US friends will not go for us. They might support us, but if we don't do it, whereas it is exactly the big southern EU border, if we don't go for this, then we will see our competitors try and be able to either destabilize or exert pressure on us by being there. And we already see this happening with the Wagner Group over there. So this is why we feel in this area we will need some strategic autonomy. My third point on a more sovereign Europe is we need to take care of our neighborhood. And that's also our responsibility. This is why our president has proposed to organize a conference on Western Balkans by the end of our presidency. This is why we will organize a summit between the EU and Africa. And this is why also we will have a ministerial conference on the Indo-Pacific. So third point, an EU being capable of taking care of its neighborhood. That's for the, let's say, a more sovereign Europe. My second, and the second element of priority is a new European growth model. We used to have the Lisbon strategy. We feel now we need a more growth-oriented model, growth and investment-oriented growth model. And this is what we will try to achieve with the transition to a low-carbon economy with the Fit for 55% package, with also the DMA, DSA on the digital agenda, trying also to move ahead some of the priorities for a more social Europe, the adequate minimum wages directive, for example, or transparency for wages between men and women so as to ensure equality. Those are elements of a new European growth model, growth and investment model, that we will want to put forward during a summit that will be organized at the heads of states and government level on the 10th and 11th of March. And the idea is to be able, when we define our goals for investment, for growth, for social, then also to be able to discuss the revision or a revision of the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact so that they are growth-oriented. My third point would be, among our priorities, what our president has called a more human Europe, or what we call the sense of belonging. The idea being that we've all seen how difficult it is in all our countries today to bring the EU closer to our citizens and to EU citizens, to feel that citizens are involved. And there we will be focusing on several areas, going to defending our values. That's all the debate on the rule of law, and this is very important that members of the club also stick to their values and defend their values and promote them. We will also focus, as I was mentioning, on citizens' involvement. This will be the object of the political conclusion of the Conference on the Future of Europe in May. But we also have many concrete examples and priorities. More mobility for students, youth, being able to support civic commitment and a civic service, European civic service for youth, but also protecting journalists in our democracies today. So all these areas that where people feel that Europe is also something we belong to and we need to share and to protect some of those values with some of the policies that will ensure a stronger citizens' involvement. I will stop there for the, I would say, three big priorities and the areas that I wanted to present on the French presidency. I've mentioned some issues and some summits that will be taking place at the heads of states or ministerial levels. So first we will start with the One Ocean Summit in Brest in the 11th of February. We'll have this new European growth model 10th and 11th of March. we will have the EU-Africa summit by the mid of February. Then we'll have the European Council focusing also on the adoption of the strategic compass in March. And then we'll have the conclusion of the Conference on the Future of Europe in May, and most probably the conference on Western Balkans in June. As a conclusion, I don't think we're ambitious for the sake of being ambitious. It's just that EU has a strong strategic agenda we want to deliver on, and we will do the utmost within the TRIO program to try and move forward those goals. But we will certainly not achieve this alone. We are not alone as we are in the TRIO, and we've been, as the Minister has just mentioned it, negotiating and preparing an 18-month program. And in many of the files I've been mentioning, even if we will have our presidential election, as it will be also for the legislative agenda a Brussels-driven presidency, it will be a full 6-month presidency, going as far as we can on the legislative agenda. And after this, also looking forward to the Czech and to the Swedish presidency to finish those tasks in some of the files where we will have reached an agreement in the Council during our presidency, and when it will be for the Czech presidency or the Swedish presidency to carry on this basis with the European Parliament, as you know, in the co-decision or ordinary legislative procedure. So as for the legislative agenda, we're very happy to be in this TRIO, very happy that we have a TRIO program, because as you see, the legislative agenda requires not only the French, but also the Czech and the Swedish presidency to be honest brokers. And this goes beyond just a 6-month presidency, even if we have also some impetus to put for a more sovereign Europe, and this is the sense of our priorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your overview. It's a very ambitious presidency, as we can all agree with all the priorities. And I would like to give floor now to our expert, Lukáš Macek. Could you present please your views on the presidency itself and on the TRIO? Thank you very much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to be here. I'm very happy, and it's an honor for me. And I will make only 2 remarks for this introductory round of speeches. One remark will be a little bit, maybe slightly pessimistic. It will be focused on risks. And the second one will be a little bit more optimistic, focusing on opportunities. My first remark is that there's a common point for the 3 countries who are preparing for presidencies or are already performing a presidency, which is the fact that they have been preparing, or they are preparing for presidency in a kind of tricky political internal situation. Well, for France, obviously, there's the presidential election issue. I think there are 2 main reasons why it's a tricky situation. The first one is that a presidency is supposed to be able to reach out to the partners, and especially if there's a blocked situation, presidency in general is more or less expected to be able to bring some more European approach and to be able to put aside a little bit its own national priorities or interests. Obviously, it's something which is more difficult for a president who is in the same time a candidate engaged in an electoral campaign. The second problem, I think, is very obvious, that we cannot exclude the fact that it could be a very short presidency, because nobody can exclude the possibility that there will be a political change in France. It's not something very likely right now, but it's totally possible. The Czech situation is a different one, but as Mr. Minister said, the government is just starting to take responsibility, and for instance, just a relevant detail, the trio program was published, I think 7 or 8 days before the day when the new Czech government was nominated. So typically there's a question, what will be the actual political will of the Czech government within this trio program. And the other problem is that the EU, such EU issues, are rather a sensitive topic for the cohesion of the government coalition. And it's also a very sensitive topic, I think, for the Prime Minister's party. So definitely there are some political risks with Czech presidency as well. And even Sweden actually has a complicated political situation. There was a quite long government crisis from June until the end of November. There's a minority government right now. I've read somewhere that it's the Swedish government with the lowest parliamentary support ever. So quite a weak government. And there will be elections, general elections in September. So all the three countries actually are confronted with a high political risk. There's a high political risk for every single presidency. Now, let's move to a more optimistic point. And I will focus on the French and Czech situation. I will put aside the Swedish presidency. I think that there are some reasons to think that these two partners, France and the Czech Republic, could find interesting common grounds for action, that there could be a sincere willingness to reach out to one another. And I will have a look on this from the French perspective, if not from the Czech perspective. Why I'm saying this for France? Well, obviously, if we consider President Macron's record on, let's say, West-East relations in the EU, his relationship with Central and Eastern Europe, maybe the first comment would be that there are some mixed feelings, because clearly there were some misunderstandings, some tensions. For instance, President Macron's comments on NATO a year ago approximately were not very well received in Central Europe for obvious reasons. And his initial position on Western Balkans, especially his veto, which he lifted more recently, but his initial veto on North Macedonia and Albania was clearly something which was not well perceived in the whole region. On the other hand, I think that he adopted some positions on these East-West issues in Europe, which are very new in French political debate. And I think mostly, for instance, about his speech in Krakow, or Minister Le Drian's speech in Prague, which is very similar, which actually, these speeches formulated a position, a French position on Central Europe and on understanding or misunderstandings between France and Central Europe. In a sense, we have been waiting for them from 89, and the various French presidents were unable to propose such a vision on these relations. So this is on the positive side. This is why I say mixed feelings. Now, back to the presidency, against this background, I think that in the long President Macron's presentation of the French presidency at the beginning of December, there were at least two moments which were, I think, kind of reaching out to Central Europe. He insisted on Western Balkans in quite strong terms. He clearly, and Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned as well this priority. So clearly there is a common ground with the Czech presidency, who very much insists on this priority as well. And there was another moment, which may be not so important, but symbolically I think it was important, that when he addressed the rule of law issue, he insisted on the fact that it's not a West-East problem, that it's something which is, that political forces who are contesting the rule of law's principles exist everywhere in Europe. It's not a specificity of only several Central European countries. Now, from the Czech perspective, 2 or 3 days ago, I had no idea what to say, but then I discovered the government manifesto, and I was quite surprised to find some elements in the European issues part of the manifesto. First, what is really surprising to me is that there's clearly said that there is a priority given to the strategic partnership with France. France is clearly indicated as a strategic partner, which is understandable considering the presence in the same trio of EU Council presidencies, but the fact that in the very government manifesto it's stated in such a clear manner is quite surprising in my view. And there's a lot of small points which are very Emmanuel Macron's compatible, if I may say. For instance, there's a mention of youth mobility, which is a priority of the French presidency. There's a statement saying that resources should be strengthened for defense, environment, and digitalization, very compatible with French presidency priorities. Western Balkans, but also, again, something which could be considered as quite astonishing from the Czech perspective, there's an explicit mention of Southern Mediterranean and Sahel. There's and also another point, a point on conference of the platform of European memory and conscience, which I think is something very compatible with the final part of President Macron's speech on French presidency, presentation of French presidency, when he insisted on the human dimension of Europe and the belonging part of his program. I think clearly there's a lot of things to, and he was also insisting on the role of historians, the necessity for Europe to face its history and also to defend work of historians in front of some forces or some countries who are trying to rewrite history. So I think, well, of course, there are some other obvious things like nuclear energy, for instance, but I wanted to focus on some not so obvious issues where I think if there's enough goodwill, good political will on both sides, definitely French and Czech presidency could do something together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to lastly invite Ms. Tomalová to share her views. I would like to just remind you, all our panelists, that we are on tight schedule, so please respect the time consecrated. Thank you.
Of course, I will comment briefly on the previous points. Thank you for the invitation. So first, I would like to comment shortly on both presidencies, how to see them, how to compare them, and then on the context of French-Czech relations. I think this bilateral context is also very important, and it will have an impact on the quality and intensity of the two presidencies. So, of course, we all know that every presidency is different in terms of ambitions and expectations. The French is, and I will repeat it, ambitious. I think it's clearly defined, and I think it's clear that it's a political priority for France and its leader at the moment. I do really appreciate some kind of continuity and importance of EU topics at the top level. that started during the presidential campaign, and it's still there. We can see a really strong continuity from 2017 speech until now. The fact that it is pragmatic, it announced to be pragmatic, is a good and a little bit conflictual, I would say, aspect of this presidency. It's good to have a bit conflictual presidency. If you have too much consensus, no one cares, I would say. If there's some conflicts, there will be, of course, victories and innovations. So you need some level of conflictual issues, and I think that France is sure that it has some as part of its presidency. The calendar is very important in this regard, as Lukáš, Macek already stated. I think we can expect very intensive 3 months before the période de réserve, when Emmanuel Macron will be absent from the political scene. So there will be a high intensity of administrative and political work at the EU level, then a little bit less from I would say April to August, then again a very intense September to December. What does it mean for the cooperation between Czech Republic and France is that we need each other to carry on projects that will be launched in the first trimester. I think our friends from France will need the Czech partners to continue. So this administrative level of cooperation is crucial. The Czech presidency is a different one, of course. It's a different one from the French presidency. It's different from the previous one. In 2019, we wanted to prove that we can learn. Now we would like to contribute more. We are also more complex in terms of actors that will be involved in the presidency. We were not so sure about the coordination mechanisms in 2007, 2008. Then we set up a model that was based mainly on the Austrian model, I think. But now we have more actors that are ambitious and want to link their topics and involvement to the presidency. I'm not only talking about political administrative actors, but also NGOs, the importance of the public debate, universities I can talk about. I think it's very important also to stress the opportunity for the Czech Republic to open some topics internally. When we compare to the French case, of course, EU topics are not so important or relevant at a political level. So we have the opportunity, and I'm quite optimistic in this regard, and I hope so, that we will reach the regions more, Prague, Brno, and other regions in Czech Republic, of course, and that we will motivate people for more deep discussions related to EU topics, because the question of image, status, and the effectiveness of EU presidency is not only a question of the Brussels level, but it has a domestic dimension. And then the second point, very briefly, to what extent the Czech-French relations are important. I think that we are obsessed with big topics for many years. We have very mixed feelings from the past. Of course, there's still some kind of bitterness after the last presidency, and we can see a more cautious approach. We accentuate respect and partnership, which is a good sign now. But I think that what's important now, it's really the everyday work and the cooperation of both administrations. And I know that the French support a lot the exchanges of officials. If I'm not mistaken, we have one French official at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at the government office. Pavlina Koupska is coming back again, and Ministry of Environment. And I think this is an important element, and assure some kind of continuity in our relations. That's something that has worked better with the Swedes, because after the last trio, we had a lot of contacts with the French administration during the presidency. Then we gave up, we quit this cooperation, and we kept going with the Swedes. And I think that's an element we should incorporate again in the Czech-French relations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to first thank all the participants to express their opinions and points on the French and on the trio presidency. So I would like to now proceed to the moderated debate. I just would like to remind that our Minister of European Affairs, Mikuláš, needs to leave at 4, so please excuse him. So first I would like to ask Mr. Beck because for the Czech Republic it's only the second presidency. And what is new for us is the process of trialogues, because we are coming into post-Lisbon period. So I was wondering whether you can tell us how the administration is preparing for the trialogues and for the post-Lisbon role of the presidency itself, and how the coordination works with the French partners. Do you prepare together with them, please?
Thank you for the question. Well, I think on the level of the administration, the cooperation with France goes very well, and the staff in Brussels is quite well prepared and professional in this respect. So I don't expect we would have some shortcomings concerning personnel at this moment on the level of diplomats. Even if there were doubts about the budget of the presidency, I still believe we are able to deliver professional presidency. I myself, I traveled to France at the end of January to meet my counterpart and to negotiate some close cooperation on the administrative level. We would like to learn how the French colleagues work on the presidency and to meet on various levels. So we would like to set up a scheme of exchanges of key people from the government's office, from ministries, to be in a regular touch with our French colleagues. And all the ministers are pretty well aware of the fact they will have to, well, learn during the first half of the year how to manage conferences and these events. So I think we will really have a very intensive cooperation with our French counterparts.
Thank you very much. I can invite His Excellency Alexis Dutertre to react, and I would like to add also a question for him. So, as we have the trialogues, is France well prepared for the pace and for the speed of trialogues? Because as your presidency is really ambitious, the pace should be really high in order to achieve all the priorities. So maybe you can react on the response of the minister and as well add your own input, please.
Thank you. Trilogues is a very, it's not a very tricky question, or not a very, I would say, easy question for the general public. I used to sit in Coreper, we did trilogues and we prepared trilogues for hours. So I think our reps in Brussels are very well prepared for trilogues. And this is maybe an area where I should stress that there's a lot of continuity and there's a lot of sense for the program and the trio program. And this is where I will go for a slight disagreement there. This is where it will be a six-month presidency, because when you have to conduct trilogues, meaning you have on behalf of the Council as a presidency to negotiate for the Council with the European Parliament. In fact, it is to your teams in the permanent representation in Brussels for the Council to go and negotiate with the European Parliament and the Commission. And this happens on the whole 6 months to try and get an agreement. And in this way, whatever the elections, we will go to reach as much results as possible during our presidency in the trilogue. And this is where, in fact, the presidential election will have, in my view, a very limited impact on our agenda. So I'm very confident, and we have established very good relationship, because this is where you need continuity on the side of the Council to be able to negotiate with the Parliament, because, of course, as member states, we will have common interests that will be different from those interests of the European Parliament. Of course, we know very well the European Parliament. In many issues, they will try to be maybe more ambitious or maybe more provocative. And in other areas, we will be in the Council more ambitious, and we will try and find a balance. This goes, for example, for the Digital Services Act or the Digital Markets Act, where we will try to reach an agreement as the presidency with the parliament during our presidency, during the trilogues. But for example, if I look at Fit for 55 package issues, we know that we might be able to deliver an agreement, a political agreement in some files. For example, we will try on the carbon border adjustment mechanism, but then we know it will be for the Czech presidency to carry on the trilogues with the European Parliament. And this is where, again, I should stress the importance of the TRIO program when you look at the legislative process. And so indeed, yes, you've mentioned, we have civil servants, Czech civil servants in France, in our administration, and we have French civil servants here in the Czech administration to try and also ease the relations and ease the channels, and this is very important when we are in this presidency responsibility. So in our side, we're very confident because it is an 18-month agenda. I would stop there.
Thank you very much for your response. So maybe I can offer a question for Ms. Tomalová because it's her subject of research. So how would you evaluate coordination mechanisms in the trio for this presidency in between France and the Czech Republic? So do we have any common Czech-French priorities already emerging, even if we have the new government? And what are the relations right now, please?
Well, I hope so. Of course we do, and I would like to say that the government office has been preparing for the presidency since 2018. So it's not a new thing with the new government, even though we have to have some certain extent of continuity. And I think it's really fair to say so, that at the administrative level we are ready, and there are many experts working on these dossiers and our priorities. And this is exactly what also can be different from the last presidency, because we were still learning, asking where to place the main EU body within the Czech government, how to communicate between Brussels and Prague, whether we are opting for a more Prague-based or Brussels-based presidency. So I think this is a truly different situation, and we can, I hope we can be sure that we have set up good working coordination mechanisms. I wanted to thank also for the clarification concerning continuity. I do also believe it's important, and it will be the case. And what I wanted to say is really highlighting the importance of the administrative level. I think that we need to understand each other, and these exchanges that are not so, let's say, that are not so central to our relations have become very important. We do repeat at different fora that respect is a very crucial element in national politics, but also at the EU level. The sense of belonging has become a very important point and priority for the French presidency. And this sense of belonging is, of course, the question of individuals, but also of state actors. That's something we have to comment on, but we have to prove on the everyday basis. And involving our colleagues from different administrations, it's exactly one very important element that shows that we are ready to listen to each other, and that we understand not only the topics but also the mechanisms we put in place. One interesting question for the Czechs also would be how to use it not only in the relationship with France, but whether we can use this experience to our future EU involvement. We had this twinning practice when Czech Republic was involved, not only as someone who takes the, let's say, the expertise, but who can also give it to other EU members and non-EU countries. And I think it would be interesting to come back to these issues and rethinking maybe during the Czech presidency. Thank you.
Thank you very much for clarification. So maybe now let's move to slightly political vision of the presidency. I would like to query also the fact that we are in the after Lisbon period. So what role could other European and national institutions play in the presidency? And that would be the question for our expert, Lukáš Macek. And notably, what would be the role of the European Parliament in the negotiations and also of national parliament. We have seen the yellow card procedure raised in the last year, so maybe you can talk about it. And of course, I'm going to ask later Mr. Beck, because he was there. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may just add something on the question whether it will be a 3-month presidency or 6-month presidency, I would just suggest to consider the very solid Czech know-how on how to finish a presidency without the government. We are very good at it. Obviously the European Parliament will play a very important role, well, it's a presidency, it's not a presidency of the European Union, it's a presidency of the Council of the EU. So, by definition, it's mostly about looking for compromises and striking compromises among member states. But of course, as you mentioned with trialogues and so on, no presidency and no council, the EU Council process in post-Lisbon EU can bring substantial results without the European Parliament. So clearly there will be a very important task for it. Maybe the French presidency, traditionally, France, I think, if I may say, has a kind of problem with the European Parliament. For instance, and there are some research were made on that, for instance, the influence building in the European Parliament, France is not a model. And it's very much linked with the French internal politics dynamics. For instance, if you compare French sociology of French MEPs with the sociology of the German MEPs, differences are very important. On the German side, you have a lot of MEPs who perform several mandates and who can construct, to build up an authority, a level of expertise, which is quite rare in France. There are some exceptions, but a lot of French MEPs spend just a limited time of their political career in the European Parliament. So I think France is not necessarily an example in handling, let's say, the European Parliament, but, we can be surprised, so let's hope that things are moving forward, and but again, there will be political difficulties because French presidency starts at the very moment where the top positions in the European Parliament will be changed, and already we can see that there are possible political conflicts, possible problems with the choice of the new president of the European Parliament, with the deal, the original deal that EPP should have this post for the second part of the term will meet perhaps some difficulties, and it can create a very strong political difficulty for Emmanuel Macron if its MEPs vote for a controversial candidate from the EPP. And it was not a during the presidency presentation I already mentioned in December, one of French journalists raised this issue, and it could be something which politically could create some problems. So definitely the European Parliament will not be an easy partner, but well, it's the rule of the game.
Thank you very much for your opinion. So now I would like to continue with our minister, Mikuláš Beck, because he was chair of the European Committee at Senate, and our Czech Senate raised the yellow card in the European Taxation Directive, so maybe you could comment on that.
Just a brief comment on that. You know, I was in favor of a more careful approach to raising yellow cards during that session, but to be frank with you, the main reason for many senators to adopt the yellow cards was not so much disagreement about the substance of proposals, but the lack of impact analysis was the main reason. there was a lack of information concerning the impacts on the Czech economy and the situation of Czech citizens. So there was a long debate about who is responsible for that, European Commission or Czech government, and my task now is to bring order into the Czech, well, positions concerning European legislation. I promise to work on it hard, to have in important questions or issues better analysis of impact than in the past. That was the reason for yellow cards, not so much the substance of proposals.
Thank you very much for your opinion. So maybe I have a question for you both. Do the presidencies collaborate with other institutions in general, and are the presidencies, or is the trio presidency inclusive enough for other institutions, not only the national ones, but also the European ones? And how would you integrate all these into an integrated approach of either 3 months or 6 months presidency? You can, maybe His Excellency Dutertre can share his opinion, I'm sorry.
In fact, I don't know exactly how to answer your question, because I'm not sure I really understand it in terms of institutions. Because as Lukáš was mentioning it, it's the presidency of the EU Council. And so the importance is whether on the agenda you will be able to reach a qualified majority within the Council. So of course you can bring in other institutions. Institutionally, the Commission is always at the table, and then you prepare your discussions with the European Parliament. But then of course you try and associate stakeholders in the pre-legislative phase and so on. But when it comes to exercising the presidency, the main job is to try on each and every file to get a qualified majority and to reach the largest possible consensus for a political agreement. And so this is what we will be really trying to do in terms of, let's say, bringing input or reaching out to partners to move forward the agenda. I'm taking this opportunity to say that I disagree with my neighbor on the question of, which is different on, let's say, our influence nationally within the European Parliament, whereas a presidency's ability to handle trilogues with the Parliament. And so, of course, okay, you can say, for example, Germany has 96 MEPs and we have 79. So there's a difference there in influence within the different groups. But then you would also say that since 2019, since there are 3 main groups in the European Parliament, things have also changed in the old dynamics, where the question was, how is your national delegation within the EPP or within the ES&D group. And this has changed a lot also with the Renew Europe group, where I think the MEPs from President Macron are also here influential. So I would really make a distinction between your national influence and exactly the trends you mentioned from your national MPs, and it's true in France they tend to do 1 mandate or sometimes 2, and the way a presidency handles the European Parliament. And there, here also, I would make a difference between changing the 2.5 years mandates and the continuity with the rapporteurs. I mean, there's no change in the rapporteur, and so, in fact, for the French presidency, for the Czech presidency, and for the Swedish presidency, on each and every file, I mean, you will be dealing with the same rapporteur. And so the question is, individually, on all the files, how skilled the presidencies in the trio program will be with each and every rapporteur to get the agenda forward. And I think that's really the main point we're trying to work on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can react on that, maybe it would be nice if Minister of the European Affairs could react on the political dimension of the presidency. What was perceived during the elections? How Czech people and also French people in the meantime perceive the presidency and the role of the presidency for common people, and then we will turn into more files-based debate. And also, please, I would like to remind you that you can ask any questions here in the room, and also I would like to invite our telespectateurs or those who are present online to ask questions. Thank you.
Well, I would like to briefly get back to the question of inclusion of other partners into the preparation of presidency. Well, there is already an informal debate going on with key social partners, for instance, on that. And I would like to appoint a small advisory board representing the key players in the country. Social partners, some NGOs, universities, Czech Rectors Conference, to have some feedback from this environment about the preparations of the Czech presidency. And maybe it could help us to address the broader audience as well, to inform better about our intentions and goals. So that's the national dimension of it, and naturally the same will be the case on the European level with Business Europe or European University Association. We would like to have contact with these key players on the Brussels level as well, at least informally, you know, in the process of preparing the presidency. So that's my intention, how to involve more players into the game. And the perception of the presidency in the audience. Well, we all know that the European issues are not very well understood by the broad audience, and the presidency is obviously a good opportunity to improve the gap in informing the audience. So we will definitely prepare a communication strategy addressing the key groups. I'm ready to be very active in media during the preparation and during the presidency, and the whole team at the government's office is working hard on the communication issues concerning the presidency.
Thank you very much. So maybe let's look on the French part. So I would like to ask Mr. Macek. So what is the main role of the presidency for the French population, and what is the political dimension of the presidency and the presidential campaign? Because we have seen Arc de Triomphe and Eiffel Tower in European flag and European colors, which has never happened before or later. So is the presidency a wild card to play currently in the French politics, and how the perception is right now? Thank you.
Well, it's quite obvious that it's not the key point for the French general public, but it will raise awareness a little bit. But I think you mentioned the flag issue, and it's quite symptomatic because the debate was about the French flag, and the fact that basically it was about presenting the French presidency of the EU Council was finally totally erased in the debate in a very classic, let's say, to be very simple, left-right debate on national values and on offense made to French identity. And by the way, it was totally based on kind of fake news, because a lot of people now think that there's always a French flag under the Arc de Triomphe, which actually is not true. It's something which is installed only during specific ceremonies. So unfortunately, I'm not sure that it really changed something in the perception of French general public, France has a common point with the Czech Republic, that in Eurobarometer surveys, we are very close to each other in terms of level of Euroscepticism. With a lot of important differences. For instance, on Euro, the Czechs are the most skeptical from the European Union, which is not the case for France. But in general, as far as the general attitude to the European integration is concerned, clearly the two countries are on the lower side of support. So clearly the question is whether the presidency can change something in that. Another question is what has changed since 2017, and whether Emmanuel Macron's presidency actually changed something in the French general public attitudes to the European Union. Well, I think the best answer we will have it with the election results. Because in 2017, a lot of people, a lot of commentators were convinced that a candidate who is so much insisting on the European issues can't win. And it's true that Emmanuel Macron was more or less the only candidate who were clearly saying that Europe is a solution, not a problem. He won. But not because of the European issue, I think. So now, 5 years later, had he shifted at least a part of the public opinion on the EU issues, it's a long-term process, but maybe there's a beginning, and again, we will see, well, there's in a sense, the fact that the EU presidency and the election, the campaign, will overlap, it will probably even enhance this identification between Emmanuel Macron and the European issue. And I think it's a real double-edged sword for him, because in a sense the presidency will highlight the difference between his status of president and the other candidates, and especially but it will depend very much on the kind of issues which will be perceived by the general public. And we can have, and by the way, the last Czech presidency is a good example of a quite efficient presidency on, let's say, technical level in the Brussels area, but a total disaster on the political level and in domestic politics. So, of course, the risk for Emmanuel Macron is that it could happen in France as well. On the other hand, it's true that the general context, the post-COVID crisis, well, post, maybe not yet because we are still within it, but let's say the COVID crisis probably shifted something in French perception of the European Union. And it was very visible in his presentation of the presidency in December that he can insist on how much things evolved since he became president. And he insisted several times on the fact that when he launched some ideas during his Sorbonne speech, everybody was saying, well, it's impossible, it will never happen. And actually quite a lot of things happened, and first of all, of course, the recovery fund.
Thank you very much for a comprehensive overview of the French position and French population. So as our Minister Beck will have to leave soon, I would like to give floor to some questions. So is there anybody in the public who would like to have a question? Yes, please present yourself very briefly and take maximum 1 minute for the question.
due to the recent development in Mali, recently, 2 days ago, you know what has happened in CEDEAO and the decision of the Mali in the very last of December. So this is very tricky and very important question because it is also the specific problem. And my question is, what is the of the Czech Republic for the coming presidency, because it will be on the agenda, is how to perceive the situation and what the strategy for the very last operational mission in Takuba. And second question is the question of nuclear energy, because it is also the common interest with France, and it will be also very complicated to chair the EU or the European Council, and at the same time to try to change the position on the Green Deal and the question of the nuclear energy. Two questions for the simple answer.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry. I need to tell also to our online public. So there was a question on Takuba, on Mali strategy to pursue according to recent developments. So I would like to invite His Excellency Alexis Dutertre maybe to respond for that, because it's a high pressuring issue. And then the second question from Cyril Svoboda was about the European taxonomy regarding the nuclear financing issue that appeared a few weeks ago too. Thank you very much. So you can start with the Takuba, please.
In fact, the issue of the situation in Sahel is a little bit different than just the issues of the French presidency priorities. And so I would say that as for the French presidency priorities, we are looking at a broader view, which is the partnership we want to have with Africa. And this is why we will have this EU-African Union summit, because we feel very much it is a responsibility for the European Union to develop a balanced and a comprehensive partnership with Africa as our neighbor, and also as promoting our values and our interests. The situation in Mali and Sahel is what you know very well. The EU collectively has adopted both sanctions against the deployment of the Wagner Group mercenaries. And I think the only comment I can make is that we all have witnessed the reality of their behavior in the Central African Republic. And so I think it's not France, but it's all EU countries, and also, by the way, the Central Africans and also maybe now in Mali, they know the type of behavior they can expect. So from the EU point of view, and it's not just a French position, it's a general position there, we have adopted sanctions against the Wagner Group in this context. And then the other element is the transition. We are there in the political transition, and we are there supportive of ECOWAS, as you were mentioning, and particularly in terms of the need for a clear timetable for a political transition. So I would put it this way in terms of, I mean, a general comment on the situation. And we're also here, I mean, looking forward to also the EU training missions there. On nuclear energy or on taxonomy, I don't know if a minister... Okay. The Commission has tabled the proposal for a delegated act, a second delegated act on the inclusion of taxonomy and nuclear and energy and natural gas. I will just make a few comments. The first one is, it's not a legislative proposal, and so we are looking forward to the adoption. And our stance has always been very clear. Sorry, I think the battery follow. We have said that, in our view, nuclear is part of the solution to reach the climate goals, and that it should be treated equally to all low-carbon energy sources. And so, in this regard, we do not see nuclear energy as an energy for transition, but as a low-carbon energy that should be treated as a part of the solution and as a part of the mix in order to reach the goals. That's a long-standing, I would say, French position and not an EU presidency position. But as I don't have to express myself as EU president, as we have no legislative role on this specific file, which is a delegated act.
Perfect, thank you very much. Maybe I can invite the Minister of European Affairs of the Czech Republic to react on the taxonomy. And I also have a special question from the online public to ask him, so I will ask later. Thank you.
Well, just a comment on the taxonomy issue. It seems to me that it's quite clear that the former Czech governments went a dead-end street over the last decade. We haven't built any nuclear blocks, we have stopped building renewables, and we have totally neglected hydrogen sources. And now we face a very serious and difficult situation. And the new government has to prepare a new energetic strategy, because we went through the debate on Fit for 55 and renewables last year without an updated energetic strategy. That's a huge mistake. And we face really a very serious situation, and we have to be frank with our European partners and to clarify the issue. And I think we have to be very realistic. We fight now for nuclear energy to be included. That's fine, that's reasonable. But it's a mid-term or long-term solution for the Czech Republic, because we will face the most difficult times in 20s. Now, not 38, when the first block in Dukovany could produce some electric energy. So we have to find a strategy for the decade now. With gas, hydrogen, renewables, it will be a very difficult debate, and there are many stereotypes in the audience and even among the politicians. And we have to find a realistic position. And it will be really difficult, that's true. Well, I think in that respect the question should go, to the foreign minister, because we have negotiated quite clear division of labor with Mr. Lipavsky. And I should not interfere with the agenda of Czernin. You can imagine how much tension that would produce very soon. Just at the start of my career, to step into the territory of Czernin. I'm experienced enough from the university to not to do that.
Thank you very much. That was a very nice introduction for the second part, but I have one question for you from Vít Dostál, who is from the Association for International Affairs, especially for you. So how exactly do you want to promote the Czech European presidency to general public? Is there going to be a communication plan, and which messages do you want to spread and why? And then we will proceed to the files. Thank you.
Well, that's a question which will definitely engage me over the next month, but, well, I believe we need a communication plan with clear tasks for ministers, for Prime Minister and for Minister of European Affairs. As I said, I'm ready to be very active in this area. The messages must correspond to the priorities, so we have to wait for a while. But, just today, before I came to this debate, we had a discussion with Michal Žantovský in cooperation with the Library of Václav Havel. And for me, a good motto comes from Havel, and it's Europe as task. That's the message for me, at least privately speaking. We will see what comes out from the debates with my colleagues.
Thank you very much. And now let's move to files, and let's move also to the concept of strategic autonomy. So maybe I could have a first question for Ms. Tomalová. I would like to ask how the concept of strategic autonomy could be related to the trio priorities, and how does it fall within the Czech-French relations? Is there any notion about that, Leslie?
I'm more an expert on culture and international relations. I'm thinking about it, how it could be linked to cultural issues. And I will start with it because I know that French presidency is less conceptual, well, there are less concepts and it's more pragmatic, but I still missed more culture-related topics and issues because it has always been part of French priorities, and I have always welcomed this. Well, strategic autonomy is still a very fuzzy topic and not very clear because it has started with military and defense connotations. Now we have more, let's say, business-oriented approach. It's linked to the economic ideas, and I think that, of course, the COVID pandemics offered a different context for the understanding of strategic autonomy. But we still don't know what are these the perspectives of different member states. We still expect what the Germans will say, or the new Dutch government, how they will define their views. So what I think is important, and it's also the task of this trio, it's to be clear about the motivations and the ambitions of different member states. How do we connect them to the strategic autonomy? If it's more about reshoring and the different definition of globalization, as I understand the French position, or if it's more, I would say, a philosophical understanding of this concept. So the highest risk is to the intra-European rivalry, and that's something we should cooperatively work on.
Thank you very much for raising these points. I unfortunately have to thank you, Minister for European Affairs Mikuláš Beck. I have to thank him for his participation and for his nice words and also his visions. So I will release him to go to Brussels.
Goodbye. I have to be on my trip to Brussels now.
Yes, Europe doesn't wait, so. Thank you very much. So now let's move to strategic autonomy and to these issues that just Ms. Tomalová opened. So how the concept of strategic autonomy could be then related to priority files for the French presidency, not only in defense, but in other issues such as in climate leadership, or even, can we talk about open strategic autonomy? Maybe let's start with our expert, Lukáš Macek, to relate on that, and then let's see the practitioner's views from His Excellency.
Well, I think that the concept of strategic autonomy is something which traditionally was quite controversial, but things are evolving quite fast. And I think especially with this Czech government, there could be at least a shared diagnosis of the problem. I think that maybe in the past things were not so clear on relations with China, on relations with Russia and so on. I think on both sides there were evolutions, but from a shared diagnosis to shared solutions, the path can be very long. So I think that the priority should be to clarify the debate. And from that point of view, I think it's very important what Mr. Ambassador said, that this pragmatic approach has to be privileged, and that the conceptual debates, let's say ideological debates, have to be a little bit put aside. And clearly there were some traditional suspicions about the French insistence on these issues. I think with the current French government, current Czech government, maybe something could be built. And as I said at the beginning, especially if you read the Czech government manifesto, I really can feel there are some signals sent to French presidency, to French government, French president. The question is whether it will be possible, whether the two governments will have enough time to build something relevant. And also, well, quite naturally, we focused a lot on France and the Czech Republic, but Sweden will play a role as well. And from that point of view, I'm not sure that Sweden, as a neutral country, will be very helpful on these issues.
Thank you very much for your opinions. Now I would like to invite His Excellency Alexis Dutertre, and maybe you can more develop the concept of open strategic autonomy, what France perceives, because it's not only the strategic autonomy itself right now. Thank you.
I think you will be very disappointed with my answer, because precisely you've been mentioning concept, and I'm just here to tell you that the French presidency is about very pragmatic approach on very specific files, and in fact we have no interest in promoting a concept during our presidency. So the only hat under which, or the only umbrella under which we want to present and promote our ambitious as an honest broker to move the European strategic agenda forward is precisely the question of a more sovereign Europe. And I would go for some examples, because I don't want to, and you have not heard my president speaking about concepts for our presidency. We are talking about, I mean, very concrete results that we want the EU to be able to move forward. A very not easy topic, but the question of level playing field with third countries' competitors. It happens that we have discovered that we lack a certain number of instruments at EU level to be able to compete on a very equal footing with third countries. And so when we talk about, for example, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, it is very simple. We want it to be WTO compatible, because we are for an open economy, but we also want to make sure that our industries will be protected from carbon leakage. And trying to achieve a result on a carbon border adjustment mechanism is a very concrete tool where it's not about strategic autonomy. It is about a more sovereign Europe, meaning that we have climate standards, but we want to keep a competitive industry. And this is just a tool to have a level playing field with others to make sure that we will have a fair competition. So not about ideology, not about concept, about a pragmatic result. You mentioned the idea of reshoring. We're not there to say we want to develop the strategic autonomy or a more sovereign Europe to reshore. It's just that, for example, with the COVID situation, we have seen in many areas some dependencies in strategic value chains. And there the question is, do we want to be just rule takers, standard takers, technology takers from the rest of the world? Or are there areas where we feel that it is in the European interest to say, for example, in hydrogen, can we develop our own technology or our own supply chain or our ecosystem for technologies of hydrogen in order to be able to compete and not to lose the competitive edge. And so I could go to many other examples, but for example, when we want to promote what we call IPSE, you know, the important project of common European interest that we want to adopt at EU level in hydrogen, electronics and connectivity, health or cloud, the idea is just there are areas where the EU needs to be a competitor with level playing field tools and toolbox so as to be able to compete in an international environment which is more and more aggressive, sometimes unfair, and it's not just about security and defense. It's about technology, about industry, about culture, about climate ambitions, and about technologies. So again, no interest for concepts, interests for concrete tools that will be able to deliver results for a more sovereign Europe, which is the EU being able to define by itself and to promote by itself its own European interests.
Thank you for your clarification. So we talk about not about concepts. Now let's talk about files. And before giving the floor to other speaker, please, is there any question in the public that you would like to address? Feel free to address questions to the speakers. Okay, and also, yeah, I would like. Okay. I will just remind that online you can ask also questions, so please feel free. Or I can give the floor to your question if it's a specific question. Let's go.
Permanent solution. Now, so the situation is under control, but why? Because some countries are now helpful, including Turkey, but it is a temporary solution. So maybe the protection and...
Yes, I will just present the question to the online public. So there was a question about the Russia and Russia relationship and negotiations, plus about the external border management, because it's the part of the new migration policy and Asylum Pact. So maybe let's invite some of our experts to speak before we see a practitioner. So maybe you could provide, Lukáš, Macek can provide his opinion on that, and then we can also see the Czech views on the Russian relations or French-Russian relations later. Thank you.
I will be very brief. Actually, it's a perfect example of what I said previously, that there's a general agreement on the diagnosis. Everybody says that we need to manage better our external border. But when you start to discuss the how question, problems start. So, and the devil is in the details. So I think it's an excellent example of this situation. And by the way, if you read the trio program, it's full of this kind of general statements, which is quite normal for this type of document, which was negotiated more, I think, on the technical level. Politically, as we saw with the Czech government, well, I'm not sure that the input of the Czech government, the former Czech government, was very strong considering the context, and by definition the new government couldn't interfere. So I think that's the very problem, that you have plenty of issues on which basically everybody agrees and everybody will mention this is a priority and so on. But for instance, I think, well, I mentioned at the beginning some fields in which I think the Czech and the French government can really find a common ground. I don't think that borders, migration, or even relations with Russia are the best examples of this kind of fields. It would be great, but I'm quite skeptical. And again, also I have also to repeat a little bit myself, consider also the internal problem of the Czech government. And some comments of some senior members of the ODS on European issues or on relations with China and so on are not very Macron compatible, I would say.
So now I would like to invite Ms. Tomalová to express her point of view on Czech-French relations regarding this issue, and if we can find a common ground or Macron-compatible one.
Very complex again. I've been thinking about Havel since our minister mentioned his name. I feel he's coming back, and I like it. I think it's a very strong. It was a very strong man. A very good intellectual, and it's a very strong brand of the Czech Republic as well. So I think that this is an example that we must be pragmatic, but we shouldn't forget the concepts. And that's exactly what we will deal with Belarus. Of course, it's a pragmatic problem. We have to assure some kind of border management, but we will come back, of course, to some ethical questions and solidarity in Europe when it comes to human rights and other issues that were central to Czech foreign policy and somehow disappeared. So I'm hoping that this short allusion to Havel is a good sign for our not only branding strategy, but for the ethical questions and principles in our foreign policy. So it was just a short, non-practical parenthesis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very nicely said. And maybe I would like to invite His Excellency Alexis Dutertre to share the French views on that, and what is the main strategy or high tipping point in this issue towards the external border management in the first 3 months of the presidency, as we would say.
Definitely, it's an issue that has to be addressed politically. This is why also our Minister for Internal Affairs, Gérald Darmanin, was in Prague on the very first day of our presidency here to try also and do the honest broker tour, because he's touring capitals, in order to try and see how far we can move forward. There are several areas. The first one is strengthening the political governance of Schengen, meaning that we lack in the Schengen area the type of coordination that we have for the Eurogroup. And so we will try and advance at the level of the ministers to have each and every time they meet some political discussion on how the borders and how the Schengen area should be managed from also a political point of view. And in this way, we, as a presidency, will try and move and advance the idea of a more political drive to the Schengen area, exactly like you have a Eurogroup. That's the first element. There are legislative proposals on the table, namely the revision of the Schengen Border Code, and in which we want and we will try and get some results, both for, let's say, the conditions of free movement within the Schengen area, and both also as regards the solidarity or the security mechanisms or the crisis mechanisms that we need in order to be able to address such a crisis, as we've seen with the hybrid attacks that the EU and that Poland and Lithuania have experienced from the migrants being instrumentalized by the Belarusian authorities. The other element is the Pact on Asylum and Migration, where we will try to advance and to take our responsibility to find a balance, as always, between responsibility and flexible solidarity. I will not go into all the details because it would take hours, but definitely the idea is we will try and table some elements to show the interests the EU has to take care of its borders and have a balance between responsibility and solidarity. And I think I can stop there for the time being.
Thank you very much for the French vision. Maybe now I would be interested, as our expert Lukáš Macek has studied the TRIO program well in detail. I would be interested what you think if this particular French strategy towards Schengen space and towards the protection of external borders will be a good here to the Czech partners and to the Swedish partners, and would be potentially a good here also to other member states, namely speaking about Poland, who is concerned with the problem, and other V4 countries. What would you say about that as a researcher?
Thank you. Well, the idea of having a more political management of the Schengen area, this idea of creating a kind of Schengen equivalent of ECOFIN, I think it's something which could work, which could be quite appealing to a lot of European partners, including the Czech Republic. But again, the question is what to do once you have a new, well, not a new institution, but let's say a new institutional and more political framework. If you lack the basic agreement on the very model of migration and asylum policy, if you have some member states who are openly challenging basic principles in this field, it will be difficult. But let's be optimistic. It's a first step, and perhaps it can create new dynamics. So, but clearly, I think nobody expects the French presidency or this trio to solve this problem, which is kind of disturbing, let's say, the political climate in the European Union for the last 6 years. So every even small step forward is already something we should enjoy.
Thank you very much for your opinion, and now I would like to proceed with Ms. Tomalová. I would like to relate a question about the Conference of the Future of Europe, because the public perceives the problem of migration, and notably the migration crisis of 2015, and we all know that it's still alive in Czech people's minds, because migration was a big theme during the elections and is a big theme right now even. So I wanted to ask, how would you rate the perception of migration to the Czech voters and to the Czech presidency, and if the Czechs will eventually really advance this asylum and migration pact together with the French presidency? Maybe you can share the views and relate to Mr. Macek's remarks. Thank you.
Well, concerning migration, it's still a very relevant topic in Czech Republic, even though we don't have like big issues and problems internally, I would say. But it's still on the political scene. I don't think that the current government will play the migration card when it comes to EU presidency. I'm a little bit curious about the future of Visegrad cooperation in this regard, because I am sure that the French has been monitoring as well what's going on. Then we have some kind of split between the two groups inside Visegrad countries. I'm also wondering if the French will play somehow the card of the Austerlitz format together with Austria, that was launched several years ago. So maybe this could give an interesting context for our discussions about internal management, the regional management of migration issues as well, the border management and etc. What's also connected maybe to this question is the involvement of public in discussions about the future of Europe. This is a very important point for France and for President Macron. personally, I'm not so sure that this is true for the Czech government. We haven't highlighted these issues. Lately, we've been also somehow hesitant about the involvement of the public, importance of public diplomacy when it comes to the presidency, but also outside of the EU. So I think that would be also interesting to take some inspiration from the debates and cooperation in France in these issues, how we relate to the local public, to the European audience, how seriously do we take the public consultations and how do we actually interpret them and what kind of results and impact it can have on our policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your views. Before entering into new question, I would like to still remind that we have around 15 minutes to go, and if you have any burning question here in the public, please feel free. And the same goes for the online participants. So is there any question right now in the public? Okay, thank you. Then I will proceed with this problematics of V4. Maybe His Excellency Alexis Dutertre can relate on the perception of French presidency towards the V4 group and towards the commentary Mrs. just made. Maybe could you develop on that if you collaborate on the background with the V4, and how do you relate also to these subjects in the Conference of the Future of Europe? Thank you.
Maybe too many questions. I mean, first of all, it is also the duty for any presidency to cooperate with all member states, and of course different formats. I think you've seen our president recently in December, just before the presidency, with the V4 plus France summit in Budapest. So indeed, I think that one of the, I would say, trademarks of our president was to re-engage France with countries of Central and Eastern and Oriental Europe in all the fields, and this is also very true in all the formats. We have our Minister for Economy and Finance with the V4 plus France. Our minister, I was mentioning our Minister for the Interior, he came from Prague to Prague from Budapest, and this week he was in Austria. So I think we practice the V4 format or the Slavkov format or the Austerlitz format, and all. So I don't want to comment more because it really depends on all the files, but we know, I would say, the nuances that are there, and we feel very much, and this has been a constant commitment by our president since he was elected to 2017, to actively engage. And so yes, and maybe the best way was the way our president put it, and so I will not have to paraphrase, just go to what our president said during his meeting during the V4 plus France with Prime Minister Orbán, a political opponent but a European partner. And so we agree on this formula, and I think we can then engage with all partners to address the difficult topics and also try and move the European agenda forward.
Yes, and I see Lukáš, Macek reacting, so
just a remark, again, it's a highly divisive issue for the Czech government, Czech coalition, and I think there are 2 points which could make this issue very tricky for the current Czech government. If there are new evolutions on the Article 7 issue, and if French presidency takes some new initiatives related to the rule of law in Poland and Hungary, for the Czech government it will be very complicated to react, I think. And there's a more political aspect. I think that for the Czech government, or more specifically for the main party of the government, there could be a very difficult problem to solve if there's a recomposition of the political groups within the European Parliament, because, well, Fidesz is still looking for a group, and for ODS, very tough dilemmas could be could come very soon. Remain in ECR with Fidesz, or coming back to EPP, or remain alone, or whatever. And it's quite likely that in next few months these questions will be raised, because I don't think that Fidesz will remain alone forever. And there's a kind of logical convergence between PiS and Fidesz, and for ODS, ECR without British Conservatives and with Orbán would be very difficult. And if they are in this group, especially in the context of preparing Czech presidency or during the Czech presidency, for the government as a whole, it would be a real problem politically. You know, to join a group with Mrs. Meloni and Mr. Orbán just before you start your EU Council presidency, I'm not sure it's the best thing you can do.
Thank you very much for the political vision. Is there any new question in the public? Oh, perfect. I will briefly share this question with our online public. So there was a question from a member from the Association of International Affairs about the Conference of the Future of Europe, and its main saying was, what does the French presidency accepts from it, and how does it? How would the French presidency would like to cooperate on it with the Czech presidency, because it will be the Czech presidency who will adopt these measures by the French presidency presented. So I think this question goes directly to His Excellency Alexis Dutertre, and then I will reach out to experts. Thank you.
The idea behind the Conference on the Future of Europe was from the beginning, as I mentioned, to try as much as possible to involve EU citizens in the shaping of EU policies, I would say, for the next decade, and looking at EU policies from their perspective and from the citizens' perspective. And in this respect, we have we haven't changed our mind, which is we have been encouraging in all member states, but also, of course, in France, but all member states, and the Czech Republic has also been very active in organizing debates online, on online platforms and so on, to participate on the Conference on the Future of Europe. So it's very difficult for me to say where and what we want to deliver, as we will, and the conference will be preparing the results of the consultations and on the citizens' contributions to this debate. But the idea is to have, let's say, a kind of a political conclusion event in May that our president will be chairing, where we can draw some, let's say, political conclusions in the fact that we will maybe look at, I don't know, some of the priority areas that the citizens will have put forward, and try and see whether we can turn them into either policy proposals or more strategic proposals for the EU policies to change or to be influenced. And really also I should stress the difference in the method, which is, for many years we thought, or we had been interested in, I would say, institutional reforms for the sake of institutional reforms, or at least because we felt it was very important, and it's true. And now it's more, we will look at the proposals and see whether we can achieve them within the existing treaties, or whether some treaty changes might be needed, but I don't know. And it's really, and it will be for the conference and for the exercise of the conclusion, to determine whether some treaty changes might be needed. But we're not asking for it. We're just coming from the fact that we want, let's say, a bottom-up exercise. We want the citizens to come with their proposals, and we will try and get some political conclusion on, I would say, top priority areas where we feel it's important for the EU to say we have listened, and yes, we've taken on board some of the proposals that the citizens will have put forward. That's the idea behind it.
Yes, I would like to ask Mr. Macek to share his views too, and then we will proceed to short conclusions.
I think the Conference on the Future of Europe can be very helpful to provide kind of toolbox. It can provide a lot of interesting ideas, but it will never provide, in my opinion, a political leadership. And the big question behind all this is what will be the political leadership in the European Union in next years. And it's not about the presidency of the EU Council. It's about who will win in France. It's about how efficient and coherent will be the German coalition. It's about whether there will be or not a continuity in Italy after Draghi government. And of course, if there's a long-term perspective of a kind of alliance between these three actors, and of course you need the others as well, but I think you can have a political leadership if you have a re-elected Emmanuel Macron, if you have an Italian government which is in continuity with Draghi government in a year, and again if the German government is able to deliver. So if you have this kind of context, then they will be able to pick things, interesting things in the toolbox of the Conference on the Future of Europe. But hoping that the conference in itself will bring a momentum in the European integration, personally I don't think at all that it's possible and reasonable.
Thank you very much for the very last remark. Now is the time to finish the discussions. So we have been talking about tremendous issues that are covered by the French presidency and about its ambitions plans. But last but not least, let me please remind you that I would like to thank Hanns Seidel Stiftung for all the organization and for the idea to do this kind of panel. And I would like also to thank the Embassy of the French Republic in Prague for a smooth organization. And I would like also to thank you, all the participants, for your interesting questions and for your participation here. And last but not least, thank you very much, experts, for your interesting inputs. And yes, good luck for the French presidency. We are all sure that it will be a big presidency, and hopefully the trio will proceed in the pace that it was planned. Thank you very much, and have a nice rest of the afternoon.